بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. These days of the blessed month of Dhul Hijjah, as you know, and as it's good to remind ourselves of, and I'm trying to remind myself of the fact that these days of Dhul Hijjah are the most blessed days to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the entire year. And part of that is because these are the days of Hajj. Dhul Hijjah, the days of orientation. It's very interesting in the Arabic language that the word Hajj means to orient, to turn towards, to pursue an objective. And so, even linguistically, when we look at the word Hajj, it carries this very beautiful, universal, one would say, meaning. And yes, Hajj is, of course, a very specific sacred ritual in our deen, and many of us are not in the ritual of Hajj. But nonetheless, we can share, even though we are not in Hajj, we can share in the meanings of Hajj in very beautiful and in very powerful ways. And it begins with this idea of Hajj as an orientation, as a focus. And so these days of Dhul Hijjah, we can look at them in one way as days of increased orientation with my mind, with my heart, with my emotions, with my words, with my deeds, with my actions, with all of me, that I am orienting on something. I am pursuing a purpose. I am living, as they would say, with increased, renewed intentionality. And that these days of Hajj are a sort of a journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same way that those who are called to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they journey to Allah ta'ala's house with their physical bodies. And that is the essence of the journey of Hajj, to journey, to leave one's home, to leave one's house, to leave what is familiar, to leave what is habitual, to leave what I'm attached to, and then to journey with my body, with my physical being, to the Kaaba, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the while, my heart is meant to journey to the Lord of the house. So even in that meaning of journeying with my heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those of us who are not in Hajj, we would experience, or we're meant to experience, something of that journey. And our ulama mentioned to us that in essence, it's a journey of divine hub, love. It's a journey of liberation, a journey of, one would say, happiness and of true freedom. And again, we find these meanings of the journey of Hajj within the very rites of Hajj itself. So in these days of Dhul Hijjah, and now we have but one day, tomorrow, the Hujjaj, the pilgrims, will journey to the space of Mina, or in Arabic, Muna. And Mina or Muna means longing. It means desire. And that's very meaningful because at the beginning of the journey of Hajj, that's how it starts. A longing, a yearning to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's where they begin, in Mina. And from Mina, the next day, the rukn, the integral, the essence of Hajj is Arafah. They go to the plain or the space of Arafah. And Arafah, interestingly enough, means linguistically to know, to have a sort of an experiential knowledge of something. And so the Hujjaj are going and performing the rites of the day of Arafah, by which, in their loving submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through dua and through supplications, the pilgrims learn about themselves by confessing to Allah who they are, fully, transparently, authentically, without any ifs or buts, without any excuses. And in that confessional ritual of Arafah, they know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's infinite loving mercy and forgiveness and clemency and generosity. So Arafah, self-knowledge, deep self-knowledge, and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they are cleansed on the day of Arafah, they journey to Muzdalifah. And interestingly, by the way, on the day of Arafah, the rites of Arafah, according to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually begin after Zawal, after the sun's zenith, meaning they are outside, most of them, under the scorching, burning sun, and they remain like that in dua, many of them, until after sunset, until the day cools, and until, as some ulama say, the flames of sin within the pilgrim, the flames, the inferno, the burning effects of sin and transgression in the Hajj, in the pilgrim, are erased by the coolness of the day that ends in sunset. And then they would go to a place called Muzdalifah. And Muzdalifah is another station of cleansing. And all of these stations are outside of the Haram. Arafah is outside of the sacred territory in which one encounters the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with one's body, and in which one encounters Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with one's heart. So they go to Muzdalifah, and Muzdalifah means to be drawn nearer, to be drawn closer. Linguistically, that is what Muzdalifah means. And then they go back to Muna or Mina. But now this is a full circle. They began at Mina, went through a process of cleansing and nearness, and now they're at Mina again, but with a different sense of longing and yearning. Because from Mina, as you know, they will perform the beautiful rite of the Udhiyah or the Qurban, the sacrifice. And then they would continue on to the Haram for a very special tawaf called Ifada. And Ifada means in Arabic to deluge. Ifada means to spread, to overflow. And that overflowing of emotion, of yearning, of mina, of muna, that overflowing of ma'rifah, of knowledge, that overflowing of izdilaf, of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that encounter now after being purified in Arafah, purified in Muzdalifah, and the Hujjaj now encounter the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that, and then there are more, as you know, to stay the days of Mina and to cast pebbles at the at the pillars, signifying a renewal of contract with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mention those simply as a reminder that even as those in Hajj are doing that physically, and will begin to do that starting from tomorrow, those of us who are not in Hajj, yes, we are not in Hajj, I am not in the ritual of Hajj. Yet I can live that, and I meant to live that in an abstract, vicarious sense, meaning that in these days, while the Hujjaj are performing what they are doing, I too must be in a sort of a figurative state of mina and muna, longing for a closer relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lamenting my distance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in perhaps elements of my life, longing for meaning, longing for an experience, emotional connection, emotional attachment to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, longing for a deeper, more fulfilling, richer happiness than the happiness that most of us live, the happiness of very, very um, base, raw materialism. Then I live vicariously also wanting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they do on the plain of Arafah, wanting to know my Lord and to know my Lord in an experiential, meaningful, emotional way, not merely intellectual, not merely conceptual, not merely ideational, but in an experience way. I long for isdilaf as a non-Hajj, for nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I long to be, if you like, in a tawaf of ifada. I long to be circling Allah ta'ala with my heart, with a flood of emotion, a flood of love, a flood of yearning, of longing, of hope, of awe, of reverence, that my life becomes, after these days of Dhul Hijjah, a life of encircling, uh, making Allah Ta'ala the center of my life orbit. So these are some of the meanings that those of us who are not in Hajj would be very beneficial for us to ponder. These are really the meanings that Allah has embedded in these days and connected my journey as a non pilgrim to the journey of the pilgrims. And of that most important connection, Hafidhakumullah, that I really must ponder very deeply is the ritual that I share most directly with those who are in Hajj, which is the udhiyah, which is the Qurban, which is the sacrifice. Out of all of these rituals we discussed, I live them as a non pilgrim vicariously. I live them with my heart because I'm not physically there. But the ritual that I do perform, that Allah has commanded me to perform, or has very much emphasized, depending on the fiqh of this, is the udhiyah, that I am meant to actually be part of this journey, this caravan of the Hujjaj, by participating in the Qurban or the udhiyah. And in that are also incredible, profound meanings, rich, deep, profound meanings for me to ponder, so that when I perform the rite of udhiyah, and I really should, for many of the ulama, it is something which is an emphasized sunnah if one has the means, and for some, if one has the means, it is an obligation. So this sunnah, this beautiful act of the tradition of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that has its nascence in the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and for each of us very direct relevance to our own life's orientation and our own life's journey. So what do we know? Well, we know that Hajj is the journey of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. We know that for many years he lovingly surrendered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that he sacrificed everything that he had in that surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He encountered tyrants. We know that he made hijrah from his land. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him to leave his wife, to leave his son in a barren desert. Allah tested Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam in incredible ways. And the Qurban and the Udhiyah, if you like, was a very special test for Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam to cleanse his heart, to vanquish from his heart any attachment besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at his majestic level as a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that in this rite, that this is the way that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam attains what is called the station of khulla, that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is translated as the special intimate friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word Khalil is very interesting. The word Khalil comes from a verb meaning to pierce and to penetrate. And of the early ulama were taught that the reason why Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is called the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is because the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pierced the deepest, most innermost essence of his heart. And that gift of khulla, that gift of being the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was given due to this test of the Qurban of his son. Many of the ulama say it was Sayyidina Ishaq. Some of the ulama say it was Sayyidina Ismail alayhim as-salam. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised and exalted Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam to the station of khulla. The poet says, قد تخللت مسلك الروح مني فلذلك سمي الخليل خليلا. The poet says, you have certainly penetrated and pierced the innermost recesses of my soul, and that is why a Khalil is called a Khalil. And therefore the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the most purest, unadulterated surrender, the most innocent and loyal surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what conferred upon Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam the station of Al-Khalil. And as you know, we know the test that he was asked to do, that in his advanced age, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted him, bestowed upon him a very beautiful, very dutiful, very loving, very innocent young son. And when that son reached an age of young discernment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the owner of everything, told Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam to sacrifice him. And we know very well that what was intended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was never the physical sacrifice, as we learn in the Quran. What was intended is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam at his level, remove from him the vestiges of any attachment to anything else besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, me and you, I am not Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, nor even worthy of the dust under his feet. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not test me in the way that he tested Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Yet, the commonality here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks me to perform the udhiyah, and the Qurban. And the sunnah is that I do it myself. Or the sunnah is that I learn to do it. And if I'm not able to do it, then I assign someone else to do it on my behalf. Not that I buy or purchase the meat and distribute it. That's not the sunnah. Nor is the sunnah to distribute the worth of the meat in kind or in cash. That's not the sunnah either. The sunnah is to reenact what Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam did and to apply and project that meaning on my life. Meaning that what Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was in reality sacrificing was an attachment at his level, which perhaps I will never understand. We will never understand the subtlety of that attachment, the attachment of a father, not an impermissible attachment. It's not a haram, not a prohibited attachment. It's a permissible attachment. But yet I am asked to ponder the meaning of what must I sacrifice of myself, of my nafs, of my ego, of my lower base drives, whether those drives be carnal drives, whether those drives be ideological drives, any drive in me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love. And indeed, to begin with those drives that are prohibited, whether they would be sensuous or sensual, whether they would be ideological, philosophical, ideas that I have, a style of life that I have that is not sanctioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that I too undergo the momentous difficulty of striving and struggling to surrender my heart by sacrificing that part of me, that part of my ego, that part of my nafs, the part of my drives that is inimical and is the obstacle in this journey of my hajj, of my orientation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And each of us has a story. Each of us has a story of what at this point in my life, and every year it's a different experience. Every year it will be a different Qurban. Every year it will be a different udhiyah, depending on where I am, on what I need, on what at this point in my life is the impediment between me and between the source, the infinite source of everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a Muslim goes to do the sacrifice, unfortunately, perhaps as many of us do, it is not meant to be mechanical. It is meant to be really quite momentous, that I am taking a life. And for a Muslim, taking any life, as our teachers would say, even plant life, even an insect, even a bug, that's very difficult for a believer with a sensitive mind and soul that knows what life is, that knows the value of life, the preciousness of life, the complexity of life, what life signifies of the divine attributes, divine majesty, and divine beauty. And so, by sacrificing an animal, it is truly momentous. It is tremendous. And I only do that by the explicit permission of the Lord of life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah ta'ala has allowed me and permitted me, nay, He has even commanded me to perform this ritual with its deeper, more profound meanings. And so, as it is difficult to take a life and to slaughter the animal, it is difficult to slaughter that part of myself, of my selfish drives, my egoistic drives, that are my greatest impediment at this moment in my life to reach a higher level and a more intimate relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the meaning of the Qurban. That's the meaning of the udhiyah. It's not about meat. It's not about, a mechanical ritual. It has a very profound meaning as I connected to the life and the sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, that I am meant to, at that moment, during that rite, conjure in my mind, in my heart, all of these meanings. And when I sacrifice, it is with that deep spiritual inner intent. As you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن يَنَالَ اللَّهَ لُحُومُهَا وَلَا دِمَاؤُهَا وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. Allah ta'ala, does not need the meat of what I slaughter, the blood of what I slaughter, does not reach Allah. That's not how I connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكِنْ يَنَالُهُ التَّقْوَى مِنْكُمْ. It is what is inside of me. It is what is in me of spiritual emotion, of spiritual condition, of reverence, of love, of hope of Allah Ta'ala. That is what reaches Allah, meaning connects me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I would remind myself and you, my dear brothers and sisters, each of us has a story. Each of us must sacrifice. The price of nearness to the divine, indeed the price of Jannah. Jannah is not cheap. Jannah is very expensive. The price of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the honor of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very rare and very precious, and it requires sacrifice. And therefore, in this lead up to the day of sacrifice, let me have this meaning in mind. Let the day of Arafah, which is a day of fasting, which is a day of cleansing, because on the day of Arafah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cleanses the Hujjaj and frees them and purifies them and makes them ready and eligible to come to His house. That's why without Arafah, there is no Hajj. Without me cleansing myself in seeking true forgiveness for any wrongs that I have done, that is a prerequisite of the journey and the orientation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let my day of Arafah be a day of fasting, ideally, if I can, and a day of dua, and a day of turning humbly, submissively, lovingly, imploringly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in these remaining days, and there's so few now left, before we know it, it will be over. May the meanings in my life be the meanings of sacrifice, the meanings of what I need to commit to in order to receive, and Allah knows for each of us, the gift of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was the gift of khulla, the gift of divine friendship, divine intimate friendship. Like that, for each of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a gift. Allah ta'ala is the most generous, the infinitely generous. No sacrifice of any of His ibad is unnoticed and goes unrewarded in this world in the most beautiful of ways. Let me ponder that meaning of the gift of Allah Ta'ala's nearness. Let me ponder the meaning of what I must sacrifice in my Qurban at my spiritual level. And may it be with these meanings, these incredible, beautiful meanings in our deen, that is so rich with meaning, an ocean without shores of meaning. May it be, if Allah gives me the ability to spend Arafah as it should be spent, if Allah gives me, and of course He gives me in part because of my sincerity and my fidelity and my commitment, may He give me a beautiful sacrifice. May He give me an accepted sacrifice. May He give me a purposeful, intentional, truly, truly Abrahamic sacrifice. And then may He give me a gift of Eid. And how interesting it is that the day of sacrifice for the non-Hajj is the day of Eid. May He give me a day of Eid. May He give me and you, my dear brothers and sisters, true liberation, true happiness, true fulfillment, true inner richness in a world in which we are becoming less free, less liberated, more impoverished by the day, though we have so much in our hands and so much in our homes. May Allah give us a true Eid, an Eid of Him. And the meaning of Eid is a joy that is ever returning. May it be that for me and you, for our loved ones, for our community, for the ummah at large, no matter what the trial and tribulation that might afflict us, may Allah give us hearts that are forever in Eid of Him. وجزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.